Looks good here.
Does it
Like we're
already?
good to go.
Okay. I have to give it a minute because I have to make sure that it's muted. All right. And I'm actually seeing on live as we speak. So here we go. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We are live on YouTube. I'm going to make rock stars out of each and every one of you, I hope. So, and then we're shooting for a star on the Hollywood Boulevard. We'll see how that works out. I think the only difference is when they put the stars out there, I'm having difficulties because I'm asking for my face rather than my name on there. But anyway, my name is Pascal Fettig. I'm president and CEO of Mental Health America in Boone County. And we are on our 4th webinar series. We've discussed domestic violence, substance use disorder, fitness and mental health, and also personal protection items. And we are now going to be discussing the effects of COVID-19 that it may be having on our judicial system. I have my colleague, good friend, and partner in crime, our senior Vice President of Mental Health, Katie.
Hello, how are you doing today? I want to thank everybody for being here and our panelists who I'm honored to introduce today. As Pascal said, our goal with this webinar series is just to provide as much information as we possibly can to our community, but also to the public at large about impacts of COVID-19 in different areas. And so we're very excited today to talk about the impact in the criminal justice and legal realm. And in that vein, we welcome one panelist who I am related to, believe it or not. He is a prosecutor in Whitley County, Indiana, and his name is DJ Sigler. DJ is, as I said, related to me. He is my brother, and because he may have a little dirt on me, I am going to ask some very easy questions of him today. But we're very pleased to have him, and thank DJ for being here. And also we have our local Boone County prosecutor, Kent Eastwood, with us. I don't think Kent has any dirt on me, but just in case, I'm going to still be nice to him. So
we won't. I won't. We're not under oath. All right.
Okay.
So.
All right. All right.
And I'll send you an email after this.
No, I appreciate seriously both of you gentlemen making yourselves available today to help us out. The first question I'll jump in with to Kent is, how do you feel, and I'll ask DJ to follow this up as well and fill in from his perspective and his community. How do you feel the COVID crisis has impacted so far the criminal justice realm as you're familiar with it, and what kinds of changes have you seen? And then how has your office kind of been responding to that?
Well, first and foremost, the biggest change it's had from law enforcement is it's made us a lot more reactive. We can't be as proactive as we once were, and we want to be. So that's been a change. First off, for our office and our court system, it's made every day now is different. We face a new challenge each and every single day, and a policy that you enacted yesterday could be undone or changed by rulings coming down from the Supreme Court, from the county commissioners, or even your local judges, if they might have different ways they operate. So right now we're a really go with the flow type office in terms of how we're operating. We're doing as much as we can remotely, but we're also trying to just have a situation where we know how to operate. It's chaos, but a controlled chaos, for lack of a better term, right now, and we're getting our job done. But we're just not as effective, or we can't be as effective as we used to be in terms of being proactive. And that's where I'm really most frustrated with what we're dealing with right now. Is everything is completely reactive, and
right.
That's not great for victims. We can't be out there being proactive, and it's not great for our community when we're purely reactive.
DJ, any follow up to that? Anything you want to fill in there?
Well, I certainly agree with everything Kent said. We're in much the same boat. Demographically, we're a little bit different than Boone County. We're a little tinier and a little more rural. I think Boone County is about 56 or 57,000, maybe even closer to 60 now, and Whitley's about 36 and climbing towards 40. So we've got a little bit different look at things. We are back. All of my staff is back this week. So we are working as a unit in the office now. We're closed to the public, except by appointment only. As Kent said, our biggest concern is making sure we're reaching out to our victims and getting them in the loop and keeping them in the loop in their cases. And frankly, I don't know what Kent's feeling is, but our police activity slowed a little bit during COVID-19 because I know our law enforcement officers were concerned about their health and safety and going into situations and charging into situations where ordinarily they wouldn't have hesitated. But now we've got an entirely different paradigm in terms of how you deal with people and emergent situations. So that's been a little bit different. For us, I think proximity has bred an increase. I heard Pascal talk about domestic violence. Certainly, the lockdown caused in our little community an increase in domestic violence cases. And more pointedly, as I'm learning over the course of the last couple of weeks, an increase in crimes against children. Again, for I think the same reason that domestic violence has kind of blossomed. So we've tried to redirect our efforts and our focus to those two groups of victims and really focus on what we're doing. Let me give you just a quick example. And if I talk too long, Katie, give me the high sign. We have a situation over the weekend where we had a 6-year-old child disclose that she was molested by a 12-year-old boy, which sadly that happens, as Kent knows, all the time. But what was unique about this was she was living in a home with an immigrant family, an illegal immigrant family from Guatemala, and there was COVID in the home. So our typical protocol is to have that child evaluated immediately by our sexual assault treatment center, then moved on to a forensic interview. And we have a very tight protocol in that regard. We weren't able to follow that because of COVID. We weren't able, the sexual assault treatment center wouldn't see the child, and 96 hours is your mark. We are, in terms of being able to gather DNA and forensic evidence and things of that type. So we're outside that mark because of this disease. So it has changed. I'm going to echo what Ken said. It has changed every day, every situation. And the result is, because we couldn't get the sexual assault treatment center to accept the child, we're going to be doing, get this, Kent, a Zoom interview with this child about 5 o'clock. So, there are challenges. You find your way to do the best job you can with the tools that you have where you are, just trying to keep the public's health and the health of your victims in mind.
Well, we appreciate all you're doing. Kent, do you have anything you wanted to add in that regard, or?
Well, I think DJ really talked about it. There's just so many challenges when doing investigations, and we, just like he has seen, we've seen the increase in child abuse, we've seen the increase in domestic violence, and sadly enough, we've had a couple of really horrific cases come during this pandemic, and so it's and to investigate those, it's been difficult, but we've risen to the occasion. But we're also continually changing policies. And your sexual assault center, perfect example. Before I was on this call, I was meeting with the head of our sexual assault center, that Sylvia CAC, about getting grants to enhance our technology so we can do more Zoom meetings, so we can have the ability to do a lot more stuff using technology for everyone's protection. So those are the challenges right now, is trying to meet the needs of the pandemic in our investigations, where we can do these safely and timely. It's key.
Oh, sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Well, I just came up with a question based on what these gentlemen have both said. As it changes, things change every day. I mean, the law is a very intricate matter, especially with as many rights as people have or think they have. So as things have changed, for the most part, we all have to listen to what our governor says, and a lot of the things that, whether they're restrictions or lift of restrictions, we follow the CDC recommendations in our local health departments. But are you guys having to constantly monitor how you do things based on what our state laws are dictating, or do you have to look at the federal laws as well, or have you been left to make whatever decisions as they suit your particular office's needs? If I made any sense, I'm not sure. I do, and it just seems like there's so many federal guidelines and then state guidelines and local guidelines, but the law is the law. But somehow it may be dictated by the way the federal government is working versus what the state is working. Has that been hindering your ability to perform our legal duties?
No, I think luckily as prosecutors, given our position within the checks and balances, we have a lot of discretion in how we operate as prosecutors and how we run each individual office. How I run my office and the things that I do, I'm able to adapt it for my needs, just as DJ is able to adapt his office and his needs. It's different. He and I have two totally different offices, and we'll have two totally different needs. So from that standpoint, we do have, while we work within the law, we are given a lot of discretion and latitude to operate with what we see in our best interests. As I'm sure each prosecutor does, they weigh those interests and they look to the law, and then they develop policies and procedures that way.
Yeah, we were very fortunate here, and I talk with my fellow prosecutors like Ken all the time. Two of my closest friends who are prosecutors, I describe it this way to them. I'm really fortunate here in Whitley County. I have an embarrassment of riches. I have judges that get along, that I get along with. I have a county council and a county commission that I get along with. I have an emergency management agency that I get along with, and I get along with my law enforcement agencies. So we really, I think our county was particularly effective in working together to kind of manage this. We were all on the same page. We had frequent department head meetings. We were talking all the time. And I agree with Kent, the response has to be different based upon where you are and what your situation was. So we only had one COVID related death that I'm aware of in Whitley County. We had a few cases. So it was a little bit different from from some of the folks around the state who had hot spots or hot flashes. And so they did that. But I think Governor Holcomb did a fine job in managing this and is continuing to do a fine job. I've been impressed, frankly, with Indiana and where we've been nationally and the way we've managed this crisis, which isn't to say that it's not a crisis any longer or that it's over. It's not what I'm suggesting. All I'm saying is I think Indiana, in true Midwestern fashion, had a pragmatic, practical approach to solving these particular problems, and we did it the right way.
In terms of the court, your interactions with the court, your staff's interactions with the court, what are you seeing in terms of delays that are happening because of the pandemic, and what do you anticipate being fallout from that? Are you worried about that, and how long it's going to take to catch up? Either one of you can take that question.
Ken, do you want to start crying or should I?
It's frustrating, right, DJ? We have certain cases we cannot get resolved that need to be resolved. Locally here in Boone County, we have a particular case, a doctor that was convicted of child molest of his patients that we cannot get resolved. He was found guilty by a jury, convicted on all counts. I believe it was 7 counts, if I'm not mistaken. And we cannot get to sentencing right now. It's been continued for this, not only the safety of our witnesses, who we don't necessarily want to bring them into court and expose them, but also defense attorney's issue. The defense attorney is above 65 years old. He has issues. So that's an example where we have a person who we want to get to sentencing and we can't. We have another case. Example would be a person who's about to get out of the Department of Corrections who we convicted on a sexual assault type case or a sexual crime, and he has a second sexual crime pending, but we can't get him to trial, and he's already posted bond on the case that's still pending. So when he gets out of DOC next month, later this month, he's going to be out. Whereas we could have tried that case. We were scheduled to try that case 4 months ago, and we kept moving it back a month, and now, according to the Supreme Court, we're not going to be able to try him until sometime in July at the earliest. So, to answer your question, there's been a lot of delays unnecessarily. I mean, not unnecessarily is the wrong word, but a lot of delays which are out of our control.
Sure.
Ken said it right on the head, and the directive today, the Supreme Court's order today, is that all jury trials are continued up and through July 1. And I understand that and support that, and I know why the Supreme Court made that decision. But at the same time, when I start to look at July and August and September and October, one small example, actually it's a large example for this office, but we had a case involving the death of an infant, a really terrible, awful case. It's been a high profile case in this community that was reset once from February to April, and then that landed smack in the COVID high point, and we had to move that to the end of July. Now, should the Supreme Court decide that August 1st is a better deadline, I'm going to have to put that family through another continuance. And they're great folks, and they are soldiers, and they're going to be just fine. But at the same time, you see the toll it takes on the people you're representing in the community, and that's really, really hard. And the volume question, I think, Kent, and I'd be interested to hear his take. The volume question of what happens when they turn the tap back on, so to speak. What are we going to do? We've tried to be proactive and move cases, our volume cases, our low-level misdemeanors, nonviolent offenses. We've tried to shuffle those cases around, plead a lot, maybe make a plea deal that ordinarily we wouldn't make, just to make sure that we are not killing the system again in July, August, September, and October. These are crimes that don't involve victims, don't involve violence, firearms, anything like that. Certainly don't involve domestic violence or crimes against children, but some low-level substance offenses, disorderly conducts, those kinds of things. We're doing our best to try and keep that off in the future, so that we or take those off the books rather, so we don't have to deal with that in mass later in the year.
Yeah, we've actually, we were supposed to start at the end of March. Or end of May, excuse me. We're going to do some night court with our mass driving while suspended. It's our biggest charge in Boone County. And we usually do cattle calls where you'll have 40 people come in at the same time, and you just take care of 40 cases over an hour's period. Well, today you can't do that, right? We're breaking it up, but we're going to move those to the nighttime. We're moving those to night court once a week or once or twice a month, and we're going to break those up into 10 defendants every half hour, and it's going to take us 2.5 hours to do what we did in an hour and 15 minutes. So we're doing things like that so we can take care. So the driving while suspended, while all crimes are important and we prosecute they're important, like DJ said, there are some cases that have higher priority in your list. So that way we take care of these driving while suspended cases, so we can then concentrate on the day for the domestic violence, the victim crimes, the drug dealers, stuff like that. And so, we've done similar things that you've done as it relates to types of pleas and things like that. And we've also encouraged people not to be arrested for low-level offenses, maybe possession of marijuana. Instead of arresting them, we said, send it in and we'll summons them in later. Things like that, where it's non-victim, where there's no danger to the community. We've requested officers consider doing that if the circumstance is correct.
One question I skipped over on my list here earlier, but you alluded to a little bit with regard to domestic violence and child abuse. Are there certain crimes you've seen an uptick in, or maybe a downward trend in, since the pandemic began, other than those two that we've talked about?
We've definitely seen an uptick in domestic violence and child abuse cases, and the severity of them are higher, in my opinion. We've seen and we also seen an increase in drug dealing. We have seen a decrease in drunk driving, just because people can't go to the bars. They can't go out to eat. So they're getting drunk and they're staying home, right? Which is great. So those, but also officers are not making traffic stops like they used to. Officers, they're not, before, if you're going 6 miles an hour over, they might pull you over. Well, nowadays, I think officers are a little more hesitant to make certain traffic stops if you're going 5 miles over. So they might not pull you over. So we're having less contact with the citizenry. Therefore, with less contact, you root out less crime. But definitely anything related to driving is definitely decreased in our community.
Well, I can only tell you this, Kent. Katie's sister-in-law, my wife, didn't have the opportunity that she was going 7 over and got a ticket the other day. That kind of tells you where we are with it. I think she was just targeted because she's married to me, but
My wife would say the same too, I'm sure.
she's got a lead foot. That woman, she got a lead foot.
I can tell you what they might.
I'd echo what Kent said. It's so funny to me that even though our communities are different, we're seeing the same kind of things. And again, on the hopeful end of things, what I think it speaks to is people really did pay attention to what our leadership was saying. I really believe that. And maybe that's a little Pollyannish and maybe it's a little rose tinted glasses. But I can tell you, I've sat behind this desk for 4 years now and in this office for almost 20, and I've never signed fewer operating while intoxicated charges, public intoxication charges, bar fight batteries. It's just been unbelievable to me that stuff has dwindled. But similarly, my experience is exactly like Kent has. And I don't want to get off on a drug tangent here, but meth is cheap right now. Meth is extraordinarily cheap. And that is the drug of choice in this community. That's the illegal substance that is most prevalent. And so I think the cartels have figured out pretty effectively how to manufacture that drug and put it into the system. So we're seeing a happy decline in alcohol, generally what I call general stupid offenses, generally criminally stupid offenses, and the really dangerous, really potentially violent problems. So I think that's our experience has been similar. I'm really gratified to hear Kent say that. So.
And at this point, Pascal, do you have some questions you might want to ask? I feel like some of what we had on our list, you both touched on. We appreciate that. But Pascal, do you have anything else to add or ask?
Well, yeah, I've got a couple of them, and I will, before we go, I do want to touch on domestic violence and child abuse as well. And also, well, there's a couple of things I want to throw in there, but so I think we have alluded to it a little bit, but besides the obvious one, and if that's not the right word, I apologize, but besides domestic violence and child abuse, what is your biggest concern, or were those the biggest concern that you had about the effect of COVID on the criminal justice system?
Well, for my part, yeah, I think most prosecutors think in terms of, the things that keep me up at night, the things that keep me from sleeping are, did we not have an opportunity to reach a kid or reach a victim, or did something not get reported and we're going to have a body in the morning, or we're going to have a lady in the hospital, or we're going to have a child in the hospital? So those things, yeah, those are kind of the big ticket items, the things that I sometimes that's the 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning self-reflection. Did we do enough? Are we doing enough? On the other hand, I think the net that we're casting is a little narrower than it used to be, only because people aren't having the same interactions that they used to. And some of that is healthy and maybe some of it isn't. But again, I'm coming at it from a very narrow perspective that as a prosecutor, some days having everybody stay home with your family, despite the fact that it does breed this increase in certain crimes, having everybody home with their family is a pretty darn good thing. And I slept pretty well during COVID. I slept pretty well.
Well, just to piggyback on that, the one thing that is most concerning to me is the lack of interaction that people have with children, in terms of, we don't have teachers having interactions with children. We don't have healthcare providers having one-on-one interaction with children. They're doing it via Zoom now. So Indiana is a mandatory state in terms of notifying if you have suspected child abuse, right? And right now, the people that would notify DCS, would notify local law enforcement, usually are care providers outside of the home, teachers, coaches, things of that nature. And with that decreased one-on-one interaction, the people that cannot speak for themselves are not having those people look out for them as much. And so that's the thing that's most concerning to me. And it's one of those things where I've preached with family and friends and people in my office and everyone who listen to me, that if there are people out there that you've ever had concerns about of being abused, or some type of abuse, reach out to those children, reach out to those families, and just try to put eyes on them, have Zoom meetings. I've instructed our victim advocates a couple of weeks ago to start reaching out to all of our children who are victims, just to start interaction via Zoom, these Zoom meetings, to just make sure everything's going okay with them, and making sure, because when children are at home and they're not at school and they don't have their little league coach having interactions with them, we have less of an ability to catch the abuse going on, and that's my biggest concern, and that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I want to echo that too. In what Kent said is a lot of times with Zoom learning, this is all you're getting on a kid, right? I mean, this is all you see. You don't see his back or her back. You don't see their buttocks. You don't see their arms. You don't see their legs, the bruises, the cuts, the scrapes. And I'm not talking about the everyday ordinary stuff that all our kids have had. I'm talking about the things that alert you to a larger problem. And I think that's very astute on Kent's part to note that. I think that's really important. Yeah.
I do think that there are some, believe it or not, there are some positives that have come out of this. Basically, while enhancing our technology, as Kent mentioned earlier, enhancing our safety measures and all that. But there's unfortunately too many negatives that have come out of that. And I will touch base a little bit later on, a little bit more about the domestic violence and child abuse, and our concern, that, I mean, the isolation and the social distancing and shut-in orders kind of dissipated the COVID-19 a little bit, greatly actually, but it did have an increase in, when we forced the victims to be shut in with their abusers, with maybe potentially no way of reporting it. So that is a big concern. I do want to talk about that a little bit later on. But in the same token, I know in what Katie and I does, as far as the domestic violence and our before after school work with youth and so on, we suddenly felt, for years, I thought, God, we're doing great. We're well prepared for anything that could come. And we weren't. This came so fast. We were so ill prepared. The very first few days that we were dealing with that, I didn't sleep because I thought, how am I going to do this? Did I do this? So my question, and it turned out that a lot of my concerns were dissipated. In your field, were there a lot of things that you, at first, immediately, as you were shocked with this, like all of us, thought it was going to be a big concern for your field, turned out not to be a concern or dissipated quickly? And come to find out, actually, you were prepared better than what we thought. Good one?
Yeah.
Well, that's Katie's question.
Well, I can just speak that luckily so now the whole thing is remote work, right? Working remotely. And they're encouraging that as much as possible. Well, just like DJ, this week was our first week with more than half of our staff back in the office. But prior to that, we were working remotely. Luckily, we had just instituted a pilot program of working remotely in January. We had just started. We had just taken a handful of employees and said, "Hey, let's try this working remotely." I had a couple of requests for it, so we said, "Okay, let's set you up at home and let's try this out." And so, luckily, we were a little ahead of the curve with this ability to do that. So the working remotely, while I was worried about it, for us, the transition was not that hard because we'd had a framework already in place and policies already in place in January to do that. We just had to expand it quicker and spend a little more money to get some more things where people could work at home with. But that was one of my main concerns, and luckily, knock on wood, I did something right. So I was ahead of my time, I guess.
Well, I was not ahead of my time. I was behind the curve, as I feel I usually am. We instituted a similar policy, but we had not done the groundwork that Kent had done. So we had to kind of build it on the fly. And we had a couple of weeks where I had, in particular, my child support enforcement caseworkers working from home. I have 5 of them. I had 1 in the office, and I would have 4 at home working. But I will, so my experience was actually very good with that. And we had we managed our productivity. Part of that was because of the decrease in emergency runs we had and law enforcement runs we had. We weren't getting the arrests that we ordinarily get at the same level. So we were able to manage that workflow a little better. But we always had a prosecutor in the office every day during business hours on a rotating schedule. One of the things I discovered for myself, and I'd be interested to hear what Ken has to say. One of the things I discovered for myself was I was pretty effective working from home in the mornings. Now in the afternoons, between the dog and the girl, I have 2 teenage daughters, so talk about mental health. But I found that I was really effective just in terms of managing my email, managing my messages, and getting things done that I needed done. And only, Kent, because I didn't have somebody knocking on my door or a police officer calling me on the phone or the pop in or what have you. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise to me. It pales in comparison, I think, to a lot of the struggles folks are having across the state with lost work and here. But it was a positive for me. I don't know if we're going to institute a full-on work from home policy. I would love to do that. My office administrator says no, hell no.
You're the prosecutor. You're the boss.
But right. I work for Jenny. That's all I do. I work for Jenny.
Well, just in terms of remote working, it's been helpful, but it's also been difficult. Each person is different. I have 3 boys, ages 6 to 11. There's no way I can get any work done. It's impossible. So for me, remote working was really not an option. And I've been, myself and my second in command have been in the office. One of us has been in the office every day since this has happened. And one of us our courts have still been operating, probably more so than other courts, one in particular. So he and I have been the ones going to court. The other prosecutors, we've sent them, said, you guys go home. And every once in a while we brought one prosecutor to help us out, but it's been the prosecutor and the chief deputy here who have been the ones going to court and doing that. If I could have worked from home and make it work, I would have done it, but not with those ages and those boys, and there's no way.
Well, there's just 2 of us. So we've been in the office. We haven't missed a court date. We've been through it all. Yeah. Wednesday mornings were kind of my time when the rest of it would pile up and get crazy. I could, and you get the 200, and Kent can attest to this with our switch to Odyssey. You get about 7,000 emails a day, it feels like. And so just to manage what's coming in on a daily basis, it was really great to be able to do that kind of quietly and, not have to come home at night and kick the dog and everything else. It felt pretty good.
Well, I will say that we've been pretty fortunate in our work. Our domestic violence shelter, unlike many other shelters, is scattered housing. So we were already practicing social distancing per se. We didn't have that much to worry about. Some of the shelters lost the ability to bring as many people in as they had been because of the social distancing. We didn't have that problem. And working remotely has worked great with our victims advocate. We have 5 of them. And then all of my staff is working, most of my staff is working remotely, with the exception of when Katie and I really need to meet, we work out of her driveway, me in my truck and her outside with a mask. So it's been working out pretty good. I differ a little bit from Ken, where I want to get away from the remote working as quickly as I can, but we'll see. So I do, again, I'm repeating myself. I will come back and talk a little bit more about domestic violence and child abuse, and primarily on the reporting end of it. But one of the things we were wondering is that have any of you seen an increase in juvenile offenses since the kids have been out of school? And do you see that continue to rise?
Go ahead, Ken. Go ahead.
I say once the weather gets nicer here, we've had a lot of bad weather, so the kids aren't out. And homeschooling is done this week and next week for our 2 major school systems. So I'm anticipating the increase to happen in the coming weeks. We always have an uptick during the summertime. So once all the e-learning is done, and once parents go back to work full time, there will be kids that are unattended. And so I think we will see an uptick in juvenile crime. But during this time of year, most of our juvenile crime is reported via the schools. So, so it has not, we've seen a slight decrease in that, but I don't expect that to last long.
Our experience has been the same. one of the plus sides for me as a prosecutor, it's a downside for the community, is we have an annual summer festival here called Old Settlers Day. And it's a wonderful festival. And Katie will remember the Redmond's Fair from Decatur in Adams County back in the day, very similar. But it does draw a certain element, and we see a huge spike in juvenile crime during that. It's a giant open air festival right here outside my office, really loud all the time. And it also results in a spike in 4D cases, usually about 9 months post. So I was gratified in one sense to see that maybe that's not going to happen this year. So I anticipate a little bit of a dip, considering we're not going to be having the Old Settlers Day Festival this year.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get back to the concerns of, and this really is both for domestic violence, but in particular with child abuse. You know, it's a huge concern, and as a result of this pandemic, the children who were already at risk of abuse are probably at an even greater risk. Like I said earlier, they're in shelter-in orders with the abusers. And part of the problem, and definitely in the domestic violence realm, but probably as well with the child abuse, is you know, it's all about power and control, as you well know. So now our abusers are using the COVID-19 as a form of even larger control format, including the ability to report. I mean, they may be taking our children and our survivors or victims. We like to call them survivors from the get-go because they're surviving the abuse, but they're not going to the hospitals, they're not going to the school like Kent said earlier, but they're probably also not having great access to a telephone. And if they don't get outside, the neighbors or anybody you know, can't see that something's going wrong. And so is that a major, that you're seeing a rise in domestic violence and child abuse, but is there a concern in what we're not seeing and what we're not getting reported, and meaning that it's an even larger rise than that we thought?
Well, it's a hidden problem. You mentioned power and control, but it's also a crime committed in secret most of the time. And so anything that exacerbates that secrecy, anything that gives cover to an abuser, they're going to take advantage of, in my experience, no matter what, whether it's COVID-19 or some other situation, they're going to use it to their advantage to continue their behavior. So I think what we have to do is attenuate our radar. And that's why I think what your organization and you and Katie are doing is so important, because, you know, sitting in this office, you know, we joke, and I suspect Kent's the same way. We sit in this ivory tower. We're not the ones out in the community seeing what's happening on a day-to-day basis. And you really need to have an educated, engaged citizenry. I don't mean having people, you know, seeing ghosts in the attic. I mean people who really care in your community about what's going on around them. And if you can kind of cultivate that sense of community, it's the hardest thing to do, especially for prosecutors and law enforcement. It's the hardest thing to do, to cultivate kind of trust between folks who haven't perhaps had a lot of reason to trust law enforcement or trust a prosecutor in the past, to come forward and tell their story. I have an absolutely terrific victims advocate, and I just have one. Ken, I heard you say you have advocates. You have multiple.
How do you have 5 people in child support? I mean, I just got my 4th.
I got here. I just
got my 4th. Yeah.
Listen, if here's how I figured it out. If something's bad, it happened before I got here. If it's good, I take credit for it. That's how I do it.
Well, we were really lucky in that we got a grant a little over a year and a half ago to pay for 100% of a victim advocate for 2 years.
That's great.
So that's allowed us to be really proactive in that area. But I just Pascal, you're 100% right. There's a lot of stuff going unreported, and we're not going to know about it for months, you know, for a year, what really has happened during this pandemic. And it does scare me. And the power dynamic is huge, especially now with the increasing financial burden that's coming to people.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That people are already suffering, and it's even going to get worse for some people. And as we're all aware, the financial power that abusers have over the survivors is huge. And so it's one of those tidal waves you hope doesn't come crashing down, but I suspect it will. I really suspect it will.
Yeah, I think that's
Well-
exactly right. We've got a case going right now today where I had a young lady who called in a domestic violence incident. And it's the same thing we've heard a million times. You know, there are kids present. He's slapped me. He's hit me. Get out here. The police get out there. They separate them. We wind up charging the male with domestic violence as a felony because it's prior conviction. And we take him away. And the next day, she's on the horn wanting to know why we have him in jail and why there's a no contact order. And ultimately, the reason we've seen it too many times is because he was the sole breadwinner, or at least the primary breadwinner. So she was concerned not about her physical safety. She was concerned about the physical well-being of her kids and going forward. Where was she going to live? How was she going to live? And I'll do you the courtesy of not saying what she said to my victim's advocate this morning, but yeah, that's the real challenge. And I think he's hit it right on the head that the financials in particular over the next 6 months are really going to play a key role in seeing how big that tsunami is or how small it is.
Yeah, and it's huge, and we see this all the time. DJ, I'm going to make you a little more jealous. Not only does Kent have a bunch of advocates, but we have 5, and we work as closely as we possibly can.
Call is over. Call is over.
But the other thing when we see, and you're absolutely right, the income factor is big. But unfortunately, what we hear all the time is, I don't want to take the kids away from their father, and then the biggie, and that's the one. Of many things I hate to hear, this is the one I hate. I love him, and it's love. It's dysfunctional love, but that's what it is. And during the incident, of course, everybody hates each other. But as soon as you guys come in and take him away, you're taking away the love of my life. So what if he beats me? He only does it when he's angry. I hear that all the time.
I've seen more than any other time in my career, I've seen the polar opposites more during COVID. I've seen either stand by your man firmly, or I've seen, I want that guy to go to jail for 80 years, which is also unreasonable, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I've seen, never in my career have I seen that dynamic play out on that wide a scale. Usually we kind of get things in the middle, but boy, it has either been, and it's mostly been stand by your man, but holy cow, it's managing survivors' expectations and what can be done through the criminal justice system to help them and assist them and to bring them justice. That's really been a challenge for my staff.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Any child abuse realm, and as it deals with the judicial system, do we have any concern that if our judicial system suffers a major fallback and gets boggled down with cases, are we concerned that maybe children will stay in foster care longer than they should, or worse, if the DCS agencies need to seek a court order to remove a child, is the legal system still able to act in a speedy manner? And what are your thoughts on that?
I think we're taking steps to ensure that doesn't happen. And we're taking steps in how we schedule cases, being more efficient with how we schedule cases, so we can really do the cases that are so important in emergency situations like that we can do it in a timely fashion. So that is not a major concern at this time. We're also given a great leeway by the Supreme Court of Indiana and our judges to use alternative means right now to do cases, to how we're testifying, doing hearings, and things of that nature. So we, locally here in Boone County, in some places they're completely shut down. We had one court that was probably operating on about a 40%. They were getting 40% of the cases done that they normally do. So with the downtick in cases and the ability to continue to do stuff, we're going to be okay. That really is not a major concern. And I've made it known to all the judges, and my prosecutors are on board with this. We'll work nights. We'll come in on Saturdays, just to get us caught back up if that's needed. And the judges have been receptive to that. So while I understand why that could be a concern, we're taking all the proactive steps so that will not be a reality.
Yeah, and I think too, the from my perspective, there's an important thing. Sure, the system's going to get bogged down with cases, but as Kent was describing, the difference between a driving while suspended and a DCS case involving harm to a child, that DCS case or that case involving harm to a child is going to be elevated and is going to have a certain status and priority above all of these other things. So no, I'm not going to have any hesitation about kicking a low-level misdemeanor and a bunch of them down the road a while to deal with on a Wednesday night or a Saturday afternoon or what have you. DCS cases and cases involving harm to children and domestic violence still take priority. That's kind of been the mandate from our judges and from my office, and thankfully everybody's operating on that paradigm. So I think I'm like Ken. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I don't think we're going to have kids falling through the cracks any more than we do already. Sadly.
Before I turn it back over to Katie, because you guys probably can tell I like the sound of my own voice.
Should have been an attorney.
You by the word, Pascal.
Hey, now Katie corrects me on all the time. I actually went to law school. I was in law school. The problem was it's for 40 hours. It was for 40 hours, and I think she says I went through the law school.
You passed through the law school. You did.
What's the old joke? I've never passed a bar in my life.
Well, I've done a lot. Well, I've practiced well on that one, actually. But I just want to tell you guys really quick is that one of our big concerns, and I think you guys shared it too, is the potential lack of ability of getting the reports in, or the reporting avenues that we normally count on not being there because of the shut-in orders, and possibly because of our survivors not having access to the technology. We've talked about how great technology has helped us and how we can increase using technology. But we feel that because of things like that, and maybe all the time, we need to develop a low-tech way of reporting, which in my opinion, if we go to the legislators, if we can find the proper delivery system for that, coming up with it, and I'm going to tell you about it here in a minute, coming up with this low-tech system for reporting, we could probably also give law enforcement immediate probable cause for entry. Sometimes they get to a house and they can't enter because they don't have probable cause or what have you. But what we're thinking about is a simple thing as a sticker system that we could hide within a kid's sticker book. In Greece, they have managed to make survivors aware of a phone app. But again, that's high technology. All they have to do is shake their phone and immediately sends out messages to 3 different areas that there is potential danger. But if they can't have access to a phone, we need a low-tech system. So we thought if we hid special stickers within a kid's sticker book, and a lot of them are removable, you can use them and take them off. And then that sticker appeared on the door or on the window, or better yet, inside of a mailbox, because usually the abusers are lazy and they will let their victims go out and get the mail. And if a mail carrier saw that sticker, he would immediately know that there's something wrong in that house and could contact the proper authority. And then we can get hospitals, pediatricians, stores to sell these books for us or give them away or what have you. But this is one of the things that we thought that we need a low-tech system to enhance the ability of people reaching out when they need help. And again, if the sticker is, and we get the delivery system online and people know what to look for in the sticker, there's a good chance the abuser is not going to pay any attention to a sticker being on the bumper of a car. Everybody does it. A sticker being inside the mailbox, the kids will stick them everywhere. So this is something that we're going to try to develop. It might work, it might not, but it doesn't hurt to try. So if you guys can think of any help you can give us coming up with a good system, we'll take it. So Katie, I'm going to let you jump back in with some questions.
Well, a lot of the things I had here on my list have been touched on in one way, shape, or form. But one thing I wanted to ask about domestic violence more generally, I'm interested because you guys have both been in your line of work for quite a few years and have seen, I'm imagining, the nature of domestic violence possibly change over time. I'm just curious in general, not necessarily having anything to do with the COVID epidemic, but what have you seen in terms of types of domestic violence, victims of domestic violence, levels of reporting, those types of things that have changed in the time that you've either been in office or been with the prosecutor's office?
Go ahead, Kent.
Well, some of the biggest changes, and it goes in waves, is just the reporting. We'll have waves of reporting, and then it seems like we don't have waves of reporting. And, I've heard other prosecutors' offices have policies where if a victim doesn't want you to prosecute the case, they won't prosecute. And I've heard of other prosecutors have a form you can sign where you disavow what happened or something of that nature. That's not a policy I've ever had, and I don't think I will ever adopt. I believe it's important to prosecute the cases, one way or the other, and how you resolve them it's how you resolve them is the issue. But the conviction and treatment and jail time should always be options. But really, it's the thing that I don't understand, and I can't really get a sense of it, is why do we see these waves of reporting of domestic violence, where just all of a sudden we get a ton. And it's nothing socially that's happening, and but then we go a long time without having any reports of domestic violence, and then it pops back up again. And so that's one thing that I've always been concerned with or never understood. And then and it goes in waves in terms of cooperation. And DJ talked about it before. It's not unusual for someone to be abused. And then the next day when we're talking to them with our victim advocates, or talking with them, and they don't want a protective order, they don't want to talk to us. It didn't happen like the police report said, or they just want the person out, and they're not going to cooperate. And so it's finding ways to combat, finding ways to deal with that is really the issue. And we try everything in the book in terms of trying to communicate with them as soon as possible, telling them and then trying to give them services, working with organizations like yourself and providing services, providing alternatives for housing, things of that nature. And domestic violence is one of those where sometimes it's a head scratcher. It really is. From all aspects of cases, it's head scratchers, because not being a survivor of domestic abuse, sometimes it's hard to understand what they're going through. And you look at it from this angle and you go, okay. And I've been to trainings, and you try to put yourselves in their shoes and look at it from all the different perspectives. But, in the end, you only can do what you can do. And, just know that we want them to know that we're here for them, and we want to do what's best, what we believe is best for them and best for the community. So I know it doesn't really answer your question exactly, Katie, but
No, it does.
That's my experience. I've been a prosecutor. What does my thing say over here? Okay, I passed the bar in 1999, and I was sworn in the next day as a deputy prosecutor. So so I've been a prosecutor for 21 years. So
and you're old. You're old.
Yeah. So.
Careful.
I don't think my experience has been much different. The one thing that strikes me is no matter how things change, they stay the same. And so some of the topical situations change, or the moments change. COVID-19 is one. That is a different thing. But at the bottom of it, domestic violence is the same in 2020 as it was in 1920, as it was in 1820. It is about control and power. The one thing I think that we see, that I'm seeing more and more of, is it's at its base socioeconomic level. Domestic violence is at the center of substance abuse problems, at the crux of financial problems. There are problems that prosecutors can help fix. Somebody's being harmed, somebody's being beaten. We can bring a case and change that paradigm for a short time. But the resources that we really need are the resources that you provide, which are to create better citizens, stable living arrangements, and a place where there's some hope for people who have been victims. And most importantly, to show these kids, I think, that nexus of substance abuse and domestic violence and the sexualization of children, all of that stuff, that can be broken. That there's a real hope out there for a life that doesn't involve those things. And that's what really strikes me the older I get and the more I look at this problem, is just the sheer hopelessness of the victims that we confront. They don't see any other way to live other than the way they're living. And that, if I can figure that out, I will patent it, and Ken will be my first call and Katie will be my second. So I'm hopeful.
Turn around. I got your sister gets first call. All right. I'll take the second.
Right. Good point.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
I have one. I'm gonna have one more too. Go
Okay,
ahead.
well then you can wrap it up. What would you say to survivors? And we've touched on different things throughout this webinar, but what would you say to a survivor of DV that is hesitant to report, that is unsure of what will happen once she does report, whether it be in your office or at a law enforcement agency? As to how would you reassure her as to what she can expect if she's just so scared to take that first step?
We're here for them. We're here in whatever capacity they need us to be. And we have people that are dedicated to making their life better and helping them through this time. We know that a domestic violence case, it isn't over tomorrow. You report it and it's over. We're in it to stand by you for the long haul. And whatever you need. And that's why I've got 3 full-time three full-time victim advocates who are here to take your phone calls, answer your question, help you with resources, or just be there for you to cry about the case. That is what they're here for you. And there are times when we can go as slow as you need us to go with the case. Contrary to popular perception, we're the prosecutor. We dictate the case, and so that's where, and we're here for you. We're here for you. We don't want to work against you, and I think sometimes they might get that perception, but it's really we're here to represent the people in the state of Indiana, and we have victim advocates who are there for you, and represent your rights and to help you through this process. And there's a lot of things that we can do in teaming with different organizations, much like teaming with you guys, that we can do to make positive impact in your life. And DJ really talked about it, breaking that cycle and setting the example for your kids. That was the best thing I think, if anyone's going to take away from this hour that we've talked, is trying to break that cycle and stop that for yourself and your children, and to show your children this is not a way to live, and to be that strong and be that for your person. But you can be strong with help from other people, from your victim advocates, Katie and Pascal, from our victim advocates and other organizations. We can help you be that be that person. So
yeah, I would echo that. One of the gratifying things about being a prosecutor is, and Ken just alluded to it, is in a domestic violence case, it is really an enjoyable professional experience to put an abuser who is used to being in control of the situation out of control in a courtroom. It is really, really gratifying. And that experience, in my small rural jurisdiction, has been among the most beneficial to me personally and professionally. And so I think that our victims have once they see that particular individual who has been abusing them and has been the focus of their life, and they haven't been allowed to have another focus, or they haven't been allowed to talk to other people, or they haven't been allowed to view humanity, to be a little extravagant about it. Once they see that there are people out there that are dedicated to their well-being and standing up for the right thing and protecting them and doing that there is an oh my goodness moment there. There's a light bulb moment, and it's pretty powerful. And again, it's one of the most gratifying things that I've experienced in my time as a prosecutor. So I think there's a lot of there at the end of these cases, not certainly during them, But at the end of them, there's a real sense of hopefulness that we try and instill in our survivors and our victims about what comes next. And we've started to cultivate in our community a lot of really terrific resources designed to not just help them through the time that they're confronted with this difficulty in terms of the court system, in terms of prosecution, but what that life looks like after conviction. There's a life after that. If that guy goes to jail for a year or 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, when he gets out, there's a plan for you, and we can help you make that plan. And that's one of the things that's, as I've said, been extraordinarily gratifying for me.
Okay, great. Well, I do, since we were kind of, we've covered a whole lot of subjects, and I really appreciate that, the wealth of knowledge that I think you guys have and have given us, and hopefully whoever is watching is going to be very beneficial. But we were looking at the effects of COVID-19 on the judicial system. So I'll preface this question by saying, no offense. I really love attorneys. I work with one every day. Of course, she scares me a little, so that's part of it.
Since the late 1970s.
So, but I heard on the news, for whatever that's worth, that one of the things that has started occurring is offenders, in particular in jail, was starting to purposely try to infect themselves with COVID-19 in hope of some form of early release or something like that. So my question is, have you guys seen any offenders, but also, and I say this, and I need to say this carefully because defensive attorneys have to do what they feel is best in the best interest of their clients. Sometimes whatever that is not necessarily in the best interest of the population. So have you seen, or do you fear that you'll see any offenders and or defense attorneys try to take advantage of the COVID-19 to, let's say, win their case or get a better deal or get out of jail or something like that?
There are offenders who are trying to use the COVID-19 scare to modify their sentences. So there might be someone who's currently sitting in the Department of Corrections, and they might have, 6 months, 9 months, a year left on their sentence, and they're filing motions to modify their sentence. And I don't know how DJ is handling it, but generally, we're, as a general rule, we are objecting to those absent a best interest of justice for the whole case, which they would have to prove to us, not just because of COVID-19. And even more so, we've got a few on some, what I would call high, people that have been in jail for a long time. We're talking, 30 years. They're about near the end of their sentence, but there have been a couple of people that on bigger cases, one in fact a murder case, and a few other things that wanted to get their sentences reduced somehow or change placement because of that. And obviously, we're objecting to all of those. We are seeing people who are using the COVID-19 within our jails. We don't have any in Boone County, but they're using that to maybe try to get released on lower bonds. And so one of the things that we've instituted in Boone County is we obtained more bracelets, GPS bracelets. We have a GPS bracelet program. And what we've done is we've put them on 100% lockdown. If the courts were letting people out, maybe that they wouldn't normally let out because of this, we've requested that they wear a GPS bracelet, and lockdown means they're not ever allowed to leave their house. And if it does, it gives us an alarm, and then we go straight to the bracelet. So we'll be within 5 minutes. So if they cut the bracelet, that's a whole nother charge. So yes, it's being used. I don't think it's really been used that effectively, or it has not placed the public in danger for the times if someone has gotten out on maybe awaiting trial, while the case is pending. They might have done that, but we're also we've instituted things to make sure that there's no danger to the public.
Yeah, we have a similar situation. I don't know if Ken has a work release facility. I don't know if there's a work release facility in Boone County. We have one. We largely, during the high time of the virus, late March, early April, we turned that facility out largely. And we returned some offenders who were near the end of their sentences or had possession, drug offenses, or nonviolent offenses, they went straight to home detention because we're anticipating on the back end of that an influx back into the work release facility. Thankfully, our jail didn't experience any COVID. I have not had any experience with somebody faking COVID. I've had our public defender up here actually had COVID-19, and I felt a great guy, great lawyer. I felt terrible for him, but the nice thing for me was I didn't have to listen to him chirp at me for 3 weeks, while he was recovering. So that was the best part for me. But the sentence modification thing, I want to touch on that real quickly because that has eaten up a huge chunk of my day every day. Just having to respond to particular offenders, you got to go back into the file. You got to see what they agreed to. You got to see if they're eligible. So you can make an intelligent objection, not because I'm agreeing to any of them, but I want to make the best objection I can. And there have been a couple where we've had lengthy sentences where people were within 2 months or 90 days of finishing their sentence. And we said, okay, look, that's a nonviolent possession or dealing offense. I can live with the fact that they're going to move to home monitoring, home detention, something like that across through community transition to get back into the community. So there have been a few cases like that, but largely we have had Boone County's experience where we've moved a lot of folks to home monitoring and lockdown, haven't given them an ounce or an inch or anything else. And it's worked out pretty well. We've had very few reports. We've had some. You always have your frequent flyers. You always have people just aren't going to make it. But largely, I think in part it speaks to the community corrections organization here in this community. They've done a fantastic job. So I really feel pretty fortunate that we haven't had any kind of major jailbreak, so to speak.
Great. Well, I am going to let Katie wrap us up, but I do want to tell you that I greatly appreciate you guys joining us, and I would not want to do what you have to do, but thank you for doing it. I think we've heard a lot of talk about our first responders, and God bless them, our nurses and doctors, but I think you guys are out there keeping us safe as well. So thank you for what you do, and keep doing it. And just don't do it to me. I'm just kidding. Actually, I work with one of the greatest lawyers who's going to make sure that I don't give you any reasons to. So, but
which lawyer do you work with? Oh,
he's not here right now. So, but thank you. It was an honor speaking with you guys, both of you, and I hope that we can meet next time, hopefully very soon, and not break the law, but possibly have fun.
Thanks, Pascal.
I just want to echo what Pascal has said. I couldn't have said it any better. We appreciate everything you and your offices, your staffs are doing in this time to keep all of us safe. And we just ask that you keep on doing it, and look forward to, like Pascal said, hopefully being able to all see each other in person again soon. But we appreciate your time today and your expertise for sure. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Katie.
All right, and if anybody out there is watching this or is going to watch it, if you have any questions, you can reach us at Mental Health America of Boone County at 765-482-3020, or you can go to our website, mhaboonecounty.org. If you have any questions about today's webcast, please let us know. That we're not going to give you our prosecutors' emails or anything like that, but if you have any significant questions, I think we can have access to them and send them their question. You've heard they're pretty busy, but they'll answer the questions in due time, and we'll post them on our website or get them back to you one way or the other. Stay safe. If you see something, report it, no matter what. Don't be worried about reporting something wrong. We'll sort it out later. Just report it. Tell us you see it. Report it. If you see a child that you think is being abused, report it. If you see a victim that's being abused, report it. If you see somebody going over the speed limit, report it. Just do your duty. I thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.